Welcome to the Vortex.
Okay, what I just wanted to briefly do was demonstrate the dowsing rods. And you have to train dowsing rods to your specs. So what I've arbitrarily done, I've just told the rods that if they cross, that means no. And then I bring them back to the rest area. And then when they have a yes, then the rods will open up real wide, and then they'll bring them back down. And these are simple rods. Anybody can make these rods. Van made these out of just some coat hangers and some straws. So by using the rods, we find out that we can douse anything that we want to. We can douse for water, we can douse for gold or oil, or for treasure. And I like using these dowsing rods because they act like an antenna. And when using the dowsing abilities, many people have been able to find water, they've been able to find missing persons, they've been able to find missing objects. And there's all different ways you can use, all different methods you can use for dowsing. One of the methods is with the pendulum. I found out early when I was real young that I had the ability to douse with water. In those days I used a fresh peach stick that was forked, and I actually doused, and this peach stick, when I came to the water, it would turn down. And it made a believer of me. And later on I found out that I could use the dowsing rods for finding pipes underground, and all the plumbers use these dowsing rods to find pipes underneath the ground. Then later on I found out that I could communicate with spirits using the divining rods. But at that time I didn't know if the spirit was good or bad or indifferent. I just communicated with them. But I began to feel the different types of energy when I would communicate with different types of beings. If the energy was real heavy, I found out that this is a being that I didn't want to communicate with because their energy was very heavy. And when I did communicate with someone who had light energy, I found out that my answers were very correct. It was only after I started using the map of consciousness was I able to distinguish between beings that were in integrity and beings that were not in integrity. I began to communicate with star beings, and I began to use the dowsing rods in different ways. And one of the fun ways was treasure hunting, going out looking for treasure. One time I was looking at the map, and I was looking at the map of Arizona, and I saw a city on the map. It was called Constellation, and it was north of Wickenburg. So I drove to this place. It was an old mining community, but when I got there, there was no town. However, there was a town marked on the map. So I asked the dowsing rods if there ever was a town of Constellation, and the dowsing rods gave me an answer of yes. So I asked the dowsing rods, is there still a town? And they said no. I said, can you direct me to where the town was? So the rods pointed off over to an area, and they told me that this area was about 2 miles away. I walked over, and I found the remnants of the old town, like the cement pads that people had for their houses. This was the only remnants of the town of Constellation. One of the people in the town had built their house up against a slope, and they had built a retaining wall up against the slope, and the retaining wall was still there, and the retaining wall was made out of rocks. So the dowsing rods took me over to the left part of this foundation, this retaining wall, and they took me over to a place where there was a loose stone. And I was able to wiggle the stone, and I pulled the stone out, and there was a compartment back behind the stone, and somebody had taken some coins and they had wrapped them up in an oilcloth and had put them in this place, and then to put the stone in front of them, and evidently they forgot about them or whatever happened. But I got this oilcloth out and I opened it up, and there was 54 coins in there. They were not rare coins, they were just old coins. But one thing that was really exciting, one of the coins was a 50-cent piece, a silver 50-cent piece. And in finding that stash of coins, I didn't spend them. I was so happy to be able to find something, so I kept them so that I could show people. Then they took me to another place, treasure hunting over in New Mexico, and I was able to do some work over there, and it's very exciting. But when you're using the dowsing rods, you do need to ask specific questions of them. You do need to get the time. Say, for instance, you're looking for a treasure, and the time when the treasure was put there, and even if it is still there, because there are times when the treasure isn't even there, but the residual energy from the treasure being there is still in place. And I remember one story about, in the early days, there was a couple of cowboys. They were pretty rough and ready, and they raised a stagecoach down by Wickenburg, and they held the stagecoach up, and they stole the strongbox, and the cowboys took off with the strongbox and went north. Well, the Wickenburg sheriff followed them. He got together a posse, and they took off after these stagecoach robbers. They finally caught up to them when they were up there in Prescott, and there was a gun battle ensued, and both of these robbers were killed. But the treasure was never found. The strongbox, nobody ever found the strongbox. The interesting part about it was about 2 years later, the sheriff retired from his job, and he moved to Texas, and he bought a big ranch down there. So it kind of tells me what happened to the treasure. So very often these treasures, even if there's a story behind them, they're probably not there because some sheriff beat me to it. So another thing you can do when you're dealing with extraterrestrial beings, you can find out quite a bit about their life and where they live, and their general overall reason for being here. And then I found out by using the dowsing rods, I could find out about people's past lives. And very often people are very interested in a past life, and sometimes they have a recollection of the past life, and they need to have confirmation. And by using rods, we're able to give confirmation to the time era when the people live and some of the events around the past life that they had experienced. And we find that there may be several people who have had a past life that they have vague recollection of, and they have the feeling that they were a particular individual. We find out one of the confusing things in past life is that there's sometimes we actually do not live the past life. We may be a spirit guide to someone else, and thus we retain the memory of that past life. And you'll find out that many times in past lives, what we're doing, we're tracing back the person's spiritual lineage as opposed to their biological lineage. You can trace a person's biological lineage going back to their father, their grandfather, and great-grandfather, and so forth. You can do the same thing with the spiritual ancestry. And that's why very often you'll find people who claim to be important person in the past, such as one instance was